We're going to explore the life and legacy of Homa Darabi, her journey, her struggles, and the profound impact she made. But we'll also dive into something just as important, the rights and responsibility she was fighting for. Homa's sacrifice became a symbolism of the struggles women faced in Iran during the Islamic Revolution of 1979. But what was the result of this heroic act and what led her into doing it? Homa Darabi was a 35-year-old woman from Tehran who on February 21, 1994, self-immolated herself in a form of protest in Inqilab Square against the oppressive treatment of women in post-revolutionary Iran. Her act of defiance would become a haunting symbol of resistance. The news of Homa Darabi's self-immolation captured global attention. Her act of defiance was a moment of intense outrage, symbolizing the suffering and resistance of Iranian women. After the self-immolation of Homa Darabi, no immediate rights or responsibilities were changed on how women were treated in Iran. However, the self-immolation of Homa brought attention to women's rights in Iran worldwide. Through Homa's story, we will explore the enduring struggle for women's rights in Iran, a struggle that, despite global attention, remains unresolved. Overall, Homa's inspiration for this heroic act is her own living experience in Iran, and her aim is to end the theocratic Islamic Republic that's ruling her country, specifically the mistreatment women were facing during this time. Homa Darabi was born on February 17, 1940. She grew up with her sister Parvin Darabi in Tehran, Iran. Homa later on got accepted to Tehran University Medical School in 1959. After graduating, she and her husband moved to the United States to pursue her studies in pediatric psychology. She practiced and lived in the United States until 1976. Homa came back to Iran and became a professor in Tehran University to teach child psychiatry. However, while keeping a professional life, her political involvement was also active. Before the revolution had taken place, Muhammad Reza Shah Pahlavi ruled Iran. However, his dictatorship caused the restriction of political freedom, but the Shah's goal was for Iran to adapt to westernized culture. Women were also allowed to wear any type of clothing they want except for a hijab, go to public spaces like the beach, have the right to vote, and have more employment opportunities. This, however, will all change when Ayatollah Khomeini comes into power, making Iran an Islamic standard nation. When the revolution took place, it resulted in women having no access to education, implementing the mandatory hijab, and no employment opportunities. Ayatollah Khomeini enacted these laws because of his traditional interpretation of the Quran, believing having a conservative dress code like the mandatory hijab shows modesty and respect for a woman's body. Khomeini's purpose in changing and shifting the laws from before is because of his power as a political and religious figure, and by implementing these laws, it's his way of rejecting and opposing westernized ideals and make Iran a theocratic Islamic Republic country. The new restrictive laws imposed by Khomeini, especially the mandatory hijab, made a significant impact on Homa and many women around Iran.
Women had been promised by Khomeini that they would have equal rights with men. Shador, the traditional shroud of modesty, would not be compulsory.
The imposition of Islamic law here has started with an order to women to cover their heads in government offices. Several of the women who stood their ground with considerable courage were stabbed as they chanted slogans for equal rights. The women of Iran must be covered from head to foot whenever they appear in public. The law is enforced by groups of revolutionary guards, ever watchful for unveiled women.
I think I'm afraid, The only place that in Iran the cops won't bother us is here. We can come here, have fun with our friends.
Homa is part of the Iran Nation Party, where they protested and demonstrated against the revolution's restrictive policies. She and the other protesters from the party met up with the first president of the Islamic Republic, discussing the issue about the rising discrimination against women. However, they were given false promises and restrictive laws escalated quickly. Homa still continued working at her jobs, but a group of extreme Islamic revolutionaries targeted Homa, causing her to be expelled from the health ministry. In 1991, Homa was fired from the university for refusing to follow the responsibility of wearing a veil. This caused her mental health to worsen, making her severely depressed. After losing her position, she continued working at her clinic, but it ended up being forcefully shut down by the government. The result of this adversity made Homa depressed and felt a loss of hope. She had multiple suicidal attempts, but her last act of protest will shock everyone worldwide. Her determination to end this regime grew even more stronger. On February 21, 1994, Homa took a dramatic step to draw attention to the suffocating repression of women's rights. She set herself on fire in Club Square, Tehran, as an act of protest against the laws and the system that denied women basic human rights. Her self-immolation was not just about her own suffering, but the suffering of women across the country who had endured years of silence and oppression. Homa went to Tehran Plaza, took her headscarf off and screamed, "Death to oppression! Long live liberty!" then poured gasoline on her head and set herself on fire. Through her actions, Homa became a voice for the voiceless, risking everything to demand justice for women denied their rights. However, even with her sacrifice, there was no change in the restriction imposed by the government, and the suffering of women continued. Homa's sister Parvin Darabi was interviewed on how Homa felt about the revolution, explaining how Homa was pro-revolution to change Iran for the better, but not under Khomeini's restrictive religious policies.
And she wasn't pro-Khomeini, but she was pro-revolution. And Khomeini, of course, had told everyone that he would like to go to Iran and go to Qom, which is a center of the Shia Muslim religion, and practice his religion. And he was going to give the government to the people of Iran.
Though Homa's sacrifice was personal, it sparked a women's rights discussion internationally. Her protest symbolized the desire for change not only in Iran, but around the world as well. Her protests quickly highlighted the oppressive laws that continued to restrict women. But even with all these efforts, no changes were made during this time. Although the authorities swiftly suppressed any public discussion, Homa's actions could not be erased from the minds of those who witnessed it, and the conversation about women's rights gained momentum worldwide. In the years that followed, Homa's defiance became a symbol of resistance, representing the broader struggle for gender equality and the fight against oppression in Iran. Other activists like the Burning Monk is an example of what self-immolation looked like, while protesting against the persecution of Buddhists in Vietnam. In 2022, Mahsa Amini, also known as the Blue Girl, was arrested for wearing improper clothing in Tehran. She ended up getting beaten up by the authority that led her to her death. The death of Mahsa Amini spread awareness worldwide, and because of her death, Homa Darabi's fame was revived and remembered for the sacrifice she made for the women in Iran. This event also proves how after all those years, no changes were made to improve the treatment of women, but other countries provided support and awareness for this continuing issue. Homa Darabi's self-immolation did not lead to immediate reforms in Iran, proving that her sacrifice, though powerful, was not enough to challenge the deeply entrenched system of oppression. Homa stood and fought for the equal rights of women, for them to be able to speak up for their human rights and civil liberties, and overall, to end the oppressive theocratic regime their religious leader imposed. In the years that followed, while no immediate legal reforms occurred, Homa's protest became a symbol of resistance, and it reflected the interconnectedness of global struggles for freedom and women's rights.